Tonight's story is called The Greenhouse That Bloomed After Midnight. So, whenever you're ready, we'll begin. The last train leaves you at a station so small it feels less like a station, and more like a thought someone almost forgot to finish. There is one wooden bench, one clock with gold hands, one lantern hanging beneath the roof, and beyond the platform, a dark hillside washed in soft rain. The train pulls away without hurry. Its windows pass through the mist like quiet rooms carried through the night. Then the carriages are gone, and all that remains is rain, the smell of wet grass, and the hush that comes after something has already left. You stand for a moment beneath the station roof, listening. The rain is gentle, not the kind that asks you to hurry, only the kind that reminds you the world is larger than your thoughts. At the far end of the platform, a painted sign leans slightly in the damp air. Bramble Hill. And below it, in smaller letters, almost hidden beneath age and weather, another line. For late arrivals and heavier minds. You read it twice, not because it is difficult to understand, only because it feels, somehow, as if it has been waiting to be read by you in particular. A narrow road begins beyond the station. It climbs slowly up the hill between hedges darkened by rain. At first, you can see almost nothing ahead, only the shape of trees, the shine of water on stone, and a low silver mist resting over the grass. Then, as you begin to walk, you notice it. Farther up the hill, behind a stand of old cypress trees, a warm light glows through glass. It is not the square light of a house window, nor the lantern light of a porch. It is broader than that, softer than that, and held in a shape that reminds you of a lantern much too large to carry. A greenhouse, a great one, old-fashioned perhaps, made of black iron and many panes of glass. Its rooflines rise from the hillside like something both built and grown. The light inside it is amber and low, like dozens of lamps turned down for evening. The rain on the glass catches that light and makes it shimmer. Even from this distance, the place looks warm. Not merely heated, warm in the deeper sense, as if it has been expecting someone tired. You continue up the hill. Your bag is not especially heavy. The day behind you is. There are conversations you replayed on the train. 3 possible futures you have tried, unsuccessfully, to organize before bed. A few old embarrassments that insisted on returning for no useful reason. And that strange modern exhaustion that comes not from movement, but from carrying too many unfinished thoughts for too many hours. The road curves. The greenhouse rises larger. Now you can see the iron arches, the wet stone steps leading up to it, the dark vines climbing the outer frame, and above the entrance, a round clock with no numbers, only a painted ring of moon phases. The gate stands open. Inside the low garden wall, rosemary and lavender bend under the rain. Stone paths gleam black-blue in the night. A shallow basin in the center of the courtyard gathers water from a lion-headed spout. Though the sound is so soft, it barely separates itself from the rain. A brass plaque beside the entrance reads, "The Midnight Greenhouse, open for those who have not yet put the day down." Something in you loosens just enough for a breath you did not realize you were holding to leave your chest in full. You place one hand on the iron handle. It is cool from the rain. You push. Warm air meets you immediately. Warm earth, leaves, citrus peel, wet stone turning dry. And beneath it all, a sweet green fragrance that smells almost like sleep itself, if sleep had roots and petals and patient hands. The first thing you hear inside is water. Not rain this time, but a slower sound. A fountain, perhaps, or a narrow stream travelling through stone channels beneath the floor. The second thing you notice is that the greenhouse is much larger than it seemed from the hill. Glass corridors branch in several directions. One room glows with hanging lanterns among tall fig trees. Another disappears into layered ferns and pale stone benches. Farther in, under curved panes silvered by rain, you glimpse lemon trees, climbing jasmine, and narrow paths that vanish behind broad, glossy leaves. The place is quiet, but not empty. It has the sort of silence that comes from things being tended well. Near the entrance, a woman is trimming a small tray of white blossoms with a pair of silver scissors. She stands beneath a low lamp, wearing a dark green cardigan and a long brown apron with pockets full of folded seed papers. As if in some way she already knew what hour you would arrive. "You made it before the heavier mist," she says. Her voice is low and even, not sleepy, only unhurried. "I wasn't aware there was a deadline," you say. "There isn't," she replies, "but it is easier to find your way before the hill begins to dream." She sets the scissors aside, wipes her hands on the apron, and crosses the tiled floor. "I'm Mara," she says. "Would you like some tea before the midnight bloom?" You are not entirely sure what a midnight bloom is, but the room is warm, the rain behind you is dark and steady, and tea sounds like the kindest possible answer to any question. So you nod. Mara leads you past a long work table covered in clay pots, seed trays, and jars labelled in careful handwriting. Not names you know from ordinary gardens. Some read moonvine, quiet moss, evening citrus, last light fern. Others say things that sound less like plants and more like instructions. For restless hands, for unfinished days, for the mind that keeps turning. She notices your glance. "This greenhouse grows what is needed," she says. "That can look unusual on the shelves." You want to ask what that means, but there is a great mercy in not having to understand everything at once. And somehow this place makes that feel not only acceptable, but wise. The tea room is small and set beneath a domed section of glass. Rain purls against the ceiling above. A round iron stove glows softly in the corner. There are 2 wicker chairs, a woven rug, and a narrow bed of night-blooming flowers whose white petals remain still for now, as though waiting for a signal not yet given. Mara pours tea from a blue enamel pot into a cup thin enough to show the light through it. The steam smells faintly of mint, pear skin, and something calmer than both. "This will help the edges soften," she says. "The edges of what?" you ask. She gives you a small smile. "Whatever has become too sharp by evening." You sit. The chair receives you in that particular way old chairs do, as if it has already agreed to support the exact weight you brought with you. The tea is warm, but not hot enough to rush. Outside the dome, rain draws silver paths down the glass. Inside, leaves stir slightly in the greenhouse air, though there is no wind. Mara places a folded seed envelope on the low table between you. Beside it, a pencil no longer than your hand. When the clock reaches midnight, she says, the flowers will open. Before they do, guests are invited to write down the thing that has followed them here. You look at the envelope. The thing? The one thought, Mara says, that keeps pretending it is 10 thoughts because it wants to stay. That makes you laugh very quietly. Not because it is funny, exactly. Because it is accurate in a way that feels like being understood without being examined. You don't have to solve it tonight, she adds. You only have to name it honestly enough that the greenhouse knows where to place it until morning. You look down at the envelope again. For the first time all day, the thought itself begins to emerge from the crowd. Not all your worries, just the central one, the one that has made the others louder. You do not write yet. Instead, you drink another slow sip of tea while the rain keeps its patient rhythm on the glass above. Some places ask you to explain yourself. This place only asks you to arrive. When the tea is finished, Mara invites you to walk the greenhouse before midnight. There are different rooms for different kinds of weather, she says, inside and out. The floor beneath your feet changes as you move deeper in. Tile becomes stone. Stone becomes warm brick. Brick gives way to a narrow wooden walkway raised above a bed of moss, so green it seems lit from within. The first room you pass through is filled with ferns taller than your shoulders. Their fronds arch over the path, gathering droplets that fall now and then with a sound like tiny, careful footsteps. The air here is cool and green and full of the smell of damp bark. A small plaque on a stone reads, "For minds that have been too bright for too long." Beyond the ferns is a warmer room where lemon trees grow in orderly rows, their leaves glossy, their fruit pale gold in the low lamplight. The scent is soft and clean, not sharp, not cheerful in a demanding way, only quietly awake. This room is good for people who feel lost in their own thoughts, Mara says. The trees remind the mind to return to one thing at a time. You smile. That would be useful, you say. It often is, she replies. The next corridor is lined with climbing jasmine and moonflowers still tightly furled. The white vines travel over iron arches above you, weaving a ceiling of quiet stars not yet fully opened. Below them stand long benches with folded blankets laid neatly at one end, as though the greenhouse assumes, correctly, that some guests will grow sleepy enough to stay still. At the heart of the greenhouse is a circular room beneath the tallest dome. In the center stands a pool of dark water ringed by smooth stones. Water flows into it from 4 narrow channels, each emerging from a different archway. Above the pool hangs a mobile made of brass leaves, shells, and tiny glass moons that turn almost imperceptibly in the warm air. The room is lit only by low sconces and the sheen of rain on the panes overhead. Everything reflects faintly in the black water below. Lamps, leaves, the outline of your own face, softer than usual in the unsteady light. This is the listening room, Mara says. For what? You ask. For the thought underneath the thought. She says it without drama, as though speaking of the weather or the hour. And that, perhaps, is why the words settle so easily. Not every worry is the real worry. Some are only surface movement. What keeps us awake, more often, is the quieter thing below. Mara gestures toward a narrow path branching off from the circular room. It leads into a smaller chamber lined with old wooden drawers, hundreds of them, each with a brass pull and a handwritten label. You move closer. The labels are not names of flowers. They are states of mind. Regret, delay, restlessness, the sentence you wish you had said differently. Tomorrow before it arrives. Homesickness for places that still exist. The habit of replaying. You let out a breath that almost becomes another laugh. The greenhouse seems to understand human beings a little too well. Mara opens one drawer near shoulder height. Inside, instead of papers or tools, you find a shallow bed of dark soil with tiny silver-green sprouts just beginning to rise. What grows in these, you ask? What people can sleep without for one night, Mara says. You do not answer immediately. Something about that line enters the body before it fully reaches the mind. Not what people can solve. Not what people can heal forever. Only what they can sleep without for one night. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps one good night is not a small mercy. When you return to the tea room, the envelope is still waiting on the table. The pencil beside it, the rain above, the whole warm, breathing body of the greenhouse around you. This time you sit, pick up the pencil, and write. Not a paragraph, not a confession. Only the truest sentence you can manage without effort. Then you fold the paper once, place it inside the envelope, and find that your breathing has already changed, just from having given the thought a shape it can no longer pretend not to have. Beyond the dome, the moon phase clock approaches midnight. The minute hand moves with grave, golden patience. Something in the greenhouse is waiting. So are you. A little before midnight, Mara leads you and the envelope to the central dome. The greenhouse feels different now. Not louder, not brighter, only more awake, as if every leaf has turned one invisible degree toward some silent appointment. The white flowers along the arches have loosened slightly. Not opened, only breathed. In the center of the circular room, beside the pool, stands a low brass box worked with patterns of vines and stars. It is no larger than a writing case. Its lid is open. This is where you leave it, Mara says. You look at the box, then at the envelope in your hand. What happens to it, you ask. For tonight, Mara says. It is given roots. Her answer settles into the room, without requiring explanation. You place the envelope inside the box. The paper makes almost no sound against the others already resting there. For the first time, you realize you are not the only person the greenhouse has ever helped. Not by a very long distance. Mara closes the lid gently. Then the clock above the greenhouse entrance begins to strike. Not with loud bells, only with 12 soft tones, each one sounding less like metal and more like a glass bowl touched at the rim. At the first tone, the room becomes still enough for you to hear individual drops on the roof. At the second, one of the moonflowers nearest the pool unfolds. Its petals open with impossible slowness, thick and pale and luminous in the lamplight. At the third tone, another opens, then another, then, farther off, a cluster along the arch. By the fifth tone, the scent begins to move through the room. Not a heavy perfume, only a cool white fragrance, something between clean linen, wet petals, and the quiet just after a long cry has ended. By the seventh, the jasmine follows, small stars of white uncurling along the ironwork above. Then, from the darker corners, other blooms wake in turn. Blue flowers shaped like bells, pale silver flowers you did not notice before, heavy velvet blossoms the color of midnight plums. The greenhouse is not suddenly bright. It is simply alive in a deeper way, as if the dark itself has begun to flower. At the 12th and final tone, the surface of the pool shivers once, then stills. No spectacle, no impossible thunder of magic. Only a bloom and a breath, and a room made more beautiful for having waited until the world grew quiet enough to notice it. Mara gestures toward one of the long benches beneath the vines. A folded blanket lies there. You sit, Then draw the blanket over your lap. The fabric is warm, though you did not see it near a stove. Wool, perhaps, or some softer weave made for being half awake beneath glass roofs, while rain moves softly overhead. Mara takes the seat opposite yours, though not in a way that asks for conversation. She only keeps company with the sort of ease that allows silence to remain whole. After a while, she says, "Most people believe the mind refuses sleep because it has too much to say." You wait. But usually, she continues, the mind refuses sleep because it is afraid no one else will keep watch. The words enter you slowly, perhaps because they are true. How often does thinking feel less like solving and more like guarding? Guarding tomorrow, guarding old mistakes, guarding possible embarrassment before it occurs, guarding the self from futures that may never happen at all. The greenhouse watches for a few hours, Mara says. That is all, but it is enough to let some people sleep. Rain moves over the roof in long, soft strokes. A bloom somewhere behind you opens with the faintest papery sigh. Water slips through the hidden channels into the pool. And for the first time, in what feels like a very long day, there is nothing expected of you except to remain still enough to let comfort happen. The blanket warms your knees. The scent of jasmine and moonflower gathers lightly in the air. The greenhouse, now fully awake, does not feel alert in a sharp sense. It feels settled, as if every petal opening has made the night gentler, not greater. Mara rises after some time and returns with a shallow tray, holding 2 small bowls. In one are slices of pear dusted with something pale. In the other, almonds glazed in honey, so lightly they shine rather than gleam. "Midnight orchard," she says, setting the tray between you. "For those who have traveled." The pear is cool and faintly floral. The almond sweet, but not enough to wake the whole body. Only enough to tell it the world is not hostile tonight. You eat slowly, the kind of slowly that belongs to places with no reason to hurry anyone toward the next thing. The rain lightens, then returns, then softens again. The glass roof above the dome glows faintly where the moon moves behind clouds. Somewhere deeper in the greenhouse, a small wooden wind spinner turns with a dry, whispering sound. "I suppose people come here with all sorts of things," you say. They do. Mara folds her hands in her lap. Some come with decisions, some with grief, some with embarrassment they have polished into a nightly ritual, some with the ordinary ache of being a person for too many hours in a row. That makes you smile again. The greenhouse seems made, in part, to return laughter to those who have been using their minds too formally. "Does it help everyone?" you ask. "No," Mara says, and the honesty of it is strangely comforting. Not in the same way. But nearly everyone leaves lighter than they arrived. Rest does not always need a miracle. Sometimes it only needs a place that does not demand more from you. The sentence remains with you, a place that does not demand more from you. How rare that is. How immediately the body knows the difference. Your shoulders lower another fraction. The line of your jaw softens. Your hands, which all day have held invisible things too tightly, begin at last to look like hands again. Mara notices, but says nothing about it. The kindest caretakers never make a performance of your easing. After a while, she stands and invites you to follow her one final time. Through a narrower passage at the back of the greenhouse, past rows of sleeping citrus, past a glass wall behind which large leaves move in slow silhouettes. Past shelves of terracotta pots, each with a tiny brass label hanging from twine. At the farthest end is a room unlike the others. It is smaller, lower, quieter. The glass overhead is partially shaded by climbing ivy, so the room feels dim even under moonlight. In the center stands a long wicker chaise with cushions the color of rain-washed linen. Beside it is a little table holding a lamp turned very low. Around the walls grow pale climbing roses, and beneath them a thick bed of moss deeper than any rug. The resting room, Mara says. You almost laugh again at the graceful obviousness of it. Of course there would be one. Some guests stay here until the hill begins to pale, she says. Others simply sit for a few minutes and remember their bodies know how to let go. You lie down on the chaise. The cushion receives you with an ease so immediate it feels rehearsed. The blanket Mara places over you is lighter than the one in the dome, but softer. The kind of softness that does not ask to be admired, because it is already busy doing its work. From here, you can see a high pane of glass, beaded with rain. Beyond it, only dark ivy and the occasional silver drift of mist. The lamp at your side glows low enough that the room remains mostly shadow and suggestion. The roses smell faintly of tea and evening. Mara lowers the lamp a little more. If sleep comes, she says, do not chase it. It dislikes being pursued. Let it notice you are no longer standing guard. Then she leaves softly, the door of the room remaining just slightly open. So there is still a little light, a little sound from the greenhouse beyond, a little reminder that you are not alone inside the dark. For a while, you do nothing at all, and because the room expects nothing else, that is enough. You listen, rain on glass, a faint channel of water somewhere beyond the wall, the small creak of warm iron cooling, a leaf turning back to stillness after shifting in the greenhouse air. Your breathing begins to lengthen, not because you force it, only because the body, once convinced it no longer has to perform readiness, often chooses rest on its own. Thoughts still come, of course they do, but not with the same authority. One appears, notices the rain, the lamp, the moss-dark room, and decides it can return tomorrow. Another starts to repeat itself, but the sentence loses shape halfway through, as though even it has grown too comfortable to finish. A third waits at the edge of your mind, like a polite visitor who realizes the house has gone quiet and chooses not to knock. You think, vaguely, of the envelope in the brass box, of your folded sentence given roots for one night. Somewhere out there in the dark greenhouse, beneath glass and leaf and moonflower scent, the thought is no longer pacing the rooms of your mind. It is resting elsewhere, not solved, not erased, only held. And perhaps that is what makes sleep possible so often. Not certainty, not completion, only being held safely enough that the watch can be set down for a little while. Your hand rests open over the blanket. The muscles in your face unclench one by one in such small increments. You only notice because the room is so gentle that every easing becomes visible. Your forehead smooths, your shoulders sink. Your ribs, which all day rose and fell around tension, begin to move around air alone. Somewhere beyond the resting room, a bloom opens. Then another. Not many, just enough to make the night feel as though it is continuing its patient work without asking your help. You imagine the whole greenhouse now, the fern room dark and green, the lemon trees under low amber lamps, the central pool reflecting moonlit panes, the brass box quietly full of folded worries from travellers, insomniacs, overthinkers, and those who simply stayed awake too long because they had mistaken vigilance for care. You imagine Mara moving somewhere in the distance, trimming a stem, lowering a lamp, covering a bench with another blanket for whoever may need it before dawn. Not rushing, not rescuing, only tending. Outside, the hill is nearly hidden by mist now. The station below will be empty, the road dark, the hedges silvered with rain. And above all of it, on the slope of Bramble Hill, the greenhouse glows softly in the night, like a thought too gentle to wake anyone. A place for late arrivals, for heavier minds, for those who have not yet put the day down. The room around you grows softer with every minute. Or perhaps it only feels that way, because you are becoming softer inside it. You turn slightly onto your side. The blanket settles against you with a small whisper. The cushion beneath your head is cool in the center and warm at the edges. The lamp beyond your half-closed eyes is now only a blurred amber moon. And in that drifting place between listening and sleep, one last thought passes through you. That somewhere, perhaps even in the ordinary world beyond this hill, there must be more places like this than people realize. Places that do not cure a life, places that do not demand brilliance or solutions or a plan for tomorrow. Only places that hold a small light in the dark and keep watch until rest arrives. Maybe some are houses, maybe some are train compartments, maybe some are one person's voice in a quiet room. Maybe some are greenhouses on rainy hills, where midnight flowers open for those who have carried the day too far into the night. The thought does not need an answer. It passes gently. Your breathing deepens. Rain moves over the glass in long distant threads. A last bloom opens somewhere beyond the door. The whole greenhouse seems to exhale. And because nothing here is asking you to keep watch any longer, because the envelope has roots now, because the hill is quiet, because the lamp is low, because the rain has chosen the roof and not your mind, your body makes the old, simple decision it has been trying to make all along. Your jaw loosens, your hands rest, your thoughts stop standing at the door. And there, beneath ivy and glass, with moonflowers open above the dark hill, in a room full of roses and soft shadows, and the quiet labor of being gently kept. You finally do the smallest and kindest thing the night has been asking of you from the beginning. You let go. And very softly, very safely, you fall asleep.